paligid. Pakinggan mo ang daing ng bayan mo, sumasamot, umaasa. Sa tulong mo at sa tulong niya, hanggat niya ay lumaya na. Di na kailangan ang pagtanak ng dugo, kailangan lang gamitin na isip at puso. Isabuhay natin ang isang kaisipan na tayo'y Pilipino at di dapat na maglaban. Isipang maka-Diyos, makabayan at makatao, ito ang prinsipyo ng kaisipang Pilipinismo. Malaya ka kabataan, bakit di mo ipakita? Kailangan ka niya, ang bayan mong Pilipinas. Agila siyang tumalagin sa iyong isipan, talas ng kuko'y bumabaon sa iyong kalamnan. Kumilos ka kabataan, huwag kang magulang-ulagan. Bayan mo'y sumasamo, panging hangat ay kalayaan. Isipang maka-Diyos, makabayan at makatao, ito ang prinsipyo ng demokrasyang Pilipino. Malaya ka kabataan, bakit di mo ipaglaban? Kailangan ka niya, ang bayan mong Pilipinas. Pinto man ang hawla, layarin ang hanap. Pagwis may malagas, pilit ring lilikas. Ang kalayaan sa ating magmumula, di tayo kikilos, sino kaya ang gagawa? Isipang maka-Diyos, makabayan at makatao, ito ang prinsipyo ng kaisipang Pilipinismo. Malaya ka kabataan, bakit di mo ipakita? Kailangan ka niya, ang bayan mong Pilipinas. Kailangan ka niya, bayan mong Pilipinas.
Ba naman ni ang dadamot din naman nila, 'di ba? Ito nga yung panoorin po natin mga kababayan, etong si Apo BBM. Ayan, yung kanyang speech doon sa United Nations. Hay, nako. Ang sarap panoorin eh. Ang ganda, nakakaiyak. Kaya lang, may mga part po ito na narinig na po natin ng maraming ulit. And I would say, this is not redundancy, but this is just being very consistent lang naman si Apo BBM dito. Ito ho, pi-play po natin.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I am Ferdinand Marcos, and I am the President of the Republic of the Philippines. I stand today on behalf of 110 million Filipinos. At this time of crisis and opportunity, I bring with me the spirit
Naririnig
of
nyo
their
ba? May audio
enduring
ba?
commitment to the ideals of our United Nations. This commitment is reflected in our solid contributions to the cause of peace and of justice. By shepherding the Manila Declaration of 1982, we helped affirm that differences should only be resolved through peaceful means. By reinforcing the predictability and stability of international law, particularly the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, we provided an example of how states should resolve their differences through reason and through right. These two
Okay, so alam niyo, totoo yung sinabi niyo ha. Wala siyang ano dyan, wala siyang um, prompter. Ang prompter yung nasa harapan, yung may dalawang salamin na nakaganon. That's the prompter. That's the teleprompter. Kung ano lang yan, black and white lang yan, puti yung letra. Yan. Wala siyang ganun dyan. Memoryado niya kasi to. At yung iba hong mga sinabi niya dito ay mga nabanggit na rin niya noong panahon ng kanyang SONA at nung kanyang inaugural speech. So he's just not trying to be consistent. He's just simply consistent, si BBM. Yan.
contributions provide useful guidance for our time. For amidst challenging global tides, an important ballast stabilizes our common vessel. That is our open, inclusive, and rules-based international order that is governed by international law and informed by the principles of equity and of justice. As I have underscored,
Sino Sandro?
the Philippines shall continue to be a friend to all and an enemy of
Of
none.
none. Diba?
This
So this is about the aside from the peace. The first part is about the peace and order situation in the country. Kung paano ito i-handle, di ba? Ngayon, ito namang huling sinabi niya, ito naman po ay patungkol po doon sa international conflict, particularly po dyan sa West Philippine Sea.
This world order traces its roots to 77 years ago. Your first Asian predecessor, Mr. President, General Carlos P. Romulo,
Wow!
called on our leaders then to make this floor our last battlefield, to determine in this hall whether humanity is to survive or be wiped out in another Holocaust. Our peoples chose survival. They chose cooperation. They chose peace. And by doing so, they made history. Today, history once again calls to us to make these choices. We are confronted by tectonic shifts that will inform the ebb and flow of this coming century. Of these, I see four challenges to the
Nangingilabot ako, lintik. Kagabi ko pa narinig ito kaninang umaga. Kaya nga nag-move ako ng oras natin Nakakapanood nito, nangingilabot pa rin ako.
continued
Alam niyo, bigla ako naalala si Lenny.
survival
Wala lang.
of our global community. First is climate change. The time for talk about if and when has long since passed. It is here. It is now. Climate change is the greatest threat affecting our nations and our peoples.
Climate change na naman ang kanyang kanina, peace and order, the local and then the regional, di ba?
There is no other problem so global in nature that it requires a united effort, one led by the United Nations. The effects of climate change are uneven and reflect an historical injustice. Those who are least responsible suffer the most. The Philippines, for example, is a net carbon
O di, kasi tama naman di ba? Kung dito sa sa usapin po ng kalikasan, kung ikaw ito na lang po, para madali tayo. Yun pong basura ho natin, wag ho nating basta na lang gawing dump site ang ating mga ilog, mga estero. Ang basura dapat ilagay po sa tamang lalagyan. Kung hindi, tayo ho ang may paglalagyan.
Sink. We absorb more carbon dioxide than we emit. And yet, we are the fourth most vulnerable country to the effects of climate change. This injustice must be corrected, and those who need to do more must act now. We accept our share of responsibility and will continue to do our part to avert this collective disaster.
Kakahiya. Alam ko kung saan ako nahiya sa part na to? Nagre-reflect sa akin mga kababayan, no, yung mga basura sa Manila Bay, sa mga dalampasigan, 'di ba? Yung makita mong mga Pilipinong umiihi sa dingding, sa gilid ng poste, na akala mo bahay nila. Grabe, nakakahiya. Ang ganda ng portrayal ng presidente, 'di ba? We take part our responsibility in this effort. Kaya tapos ang Pilipinas pag dinatnan mo rito, aray. Ay, shout out nga ho pala kay Manny Pacquiao at saka kay Robin Padilla. Tagalog po ang dapat nating gamiting lengguwahe.
We call on the industrialized countries to immediately fulfill their obligations under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement to cut their greenhouse gas emissions, provide climate financing, and technology transfer for adaptation for the most vulnerable and developing countries, to lead by example.
Right.
We look forward to concrete outcomes at the Conference of Parties in Egypt later this year. When future generations look back, let them not ask why we did not take this opportunity to turn the tide. Why did we continue in our profligate ways until it was too late?
Grabe,
This threat knows no border.
highfalutin yun. Profligate way. Grabe. Alam niyo, sinasabi niya ho dito, kailangan umaksyon agad tayo bago mahuli ang lahat, na kung saan sasabihin na lamang po natin, hindi tayo sumabay, hindi natin ginawa, sayang. Oo. Ngayon, dito ho, the President is calling all the Filipino people, everybody, including yung mga ayaw-ayaw dyan, na mga tinatawag na Pilipino ang kanilang mga sarili, na makiisa. 'Di ba? It should be a concerted effort. Ay nako, ito pa. Ito, dala pa rin niya ho yung national unity.
No social class,
Grabe, highfalutin yun. Galing.
nor any geopolitical consideration. How we address it will be the true test of our time.
Right.
Second, the development of advanced technologies is rapidly transforming human life and experience. We still barely understand how these transformations are unfolding and where they are leading. The imminent diffusion of these emerging technologies could solve many of our old problems, but they could also disrupt our political and social orders. Our governance structures must keep up. Third, widening geopolitical polarities and sharpening strategic competitions are transforming the international political landscape. A profound lack of trust is putting enormous strains on our multilateral system. Our very charter is being violated around the world as we speak. In Asia, our hard-won peace and stability is under threat by increasing strategic and ideological tensions. These behoove us to uphold the ideals that led to the establishment of this Parliament of Nations.
Grabe, Parliament of Nations. Wala ho siyang binabasa. Mamaya makikita nyo. Kukunan ho mula sa malayo yan. Dito ho banda sa may left niya. Diyan banda. Medyo gilid. Kukunan yan. Makikita nyo walang teleprompter. Mataas kasi yung lugar na yan eh. May naglalagay ng teleprompter diyan palagi. Diyan. Kaya lang, at the time, hindi ho kaya. Sa sobrang dami nila. So, nangyayari diyan, kasi yung teleprompter, para po yan sa mga prepared messages or speeches. Para doon po yan. Sa mga prepared lang. Ngayon, etong sa kanya po, sabi nga ni Ambassador Romualdez, No one knows kung ano ang kanyang i-discuss until he delivers it. Yun ang sabi niya. So ito ho, kung kailan po niya to dineliver, that's the first time na napakinggan o wala hong advance copy ito. Kaya nga wala siyang binabasa diyan kasi kabisado niya. Lagi rin naman niya pong binabanggit ito rito sa Pilipinas.
And to reject any attempt to deny or redefine our common understanding of these principles. Even as we grapple with these new long-term shifts, we remain beset by an unresolved problem. Inequalities and inequities within and among countries continue to persist, and they continue to demand urgent action. Therein lies our fourth transcendent challenge. This injustice was evident during the pandemic, when the richer nations immediately received vaccines at the expense of the have-nots. We see, for example, the dangers of this lurking in the persistent digital divide and in ballooning debt burdens. As we awaken from the economic stupor caused by the pandemic, we must reinvigorate the world economy. We must use public and private resources to encourage the expansion of trade, investment, and technology transfers to accelerate development. Knowledge and intellectual gains must flow freely to allow those lagging behind to catch up. Sustainable development will be hampered to the detriment of all if existing structures in the global economy remain unreformed. Mr. President, in these past 3 decades, Filipinos have achieved significant strides on our path to sustainable development. Despite the challenges of the pandemic and the global economic upheavals, we remain on track to reach upper middle income status by next year. With steady investment in food, public health, education, and other social services, we expect to become a moderately prosperous country by 2040. I am confident that we will achieve this vision.
Ay, sinasabi ko ito yung nakakatuwa sa kanya. So, once there was an issue, so he talks about that issue. He present the immediate, which is the short-term plan, yung resolution niya, 'di ba? Tapos meron siyang pangmahabaan pa para hindi na ito mauulit. At dito rin nag-reflect na naman uli yan sa kanyang speech. Imagine, he's so confident kasi nga he's preparing a program para pagdating ng 2040, shoot na shoot tayo sa banga. 'Di ba? So kinakailangan po rito kung sino man ang papalit sa kanya, kailangan po maging consistent. Tigilan po nila kasi yung isang malaking kalukuhan sa isip na kapag hindi sa kanila nagsimula ang isang panukala, ay hindi ho nila ipatutupad. Isa hong malaking kabalintunaan yan para sa ating mga leader. Ang ganyang klase ng kaisipan.
Yet, no nation stands alone.
Right.
The achievement of our national ambition requires a global environment that creates conditions that allow all nations, including ours, to thrive in peace. We need the United Nations to continue to work. And we, the Philippines, are determined to be part of that solution. The Philippines did not hesitate to donate to the COVAX facility that helped provide vaccines in many parts of the developing world. Multilateralism and international cooperation do make a difference. Filipino health workers were at the front lines in many countries.
Oh, palakpak na mga Filipino frontliners.
To curb the spread of the virus, risking and oftentimes sacrificing their own lives to save those of others. We have always been an optimistic and courageous nation. Despite the enormity of these challenges, we believe that solutions are within our collective grasp. You, Mr. President, have already identified 3 tools that are at our disposal. First, solidarity. We need to reaffirm the wisdom of the founders of our United Nations. This means transcending our differences and committing to ending war, upholding justice, respecting human rights, and maintaining international peace and security. Nuclear weapons continue to pose an existential threat despite our efforts to build norms that resoundingly prohibit them. We must reject the notion of deterrence and remain committed to decreasing the global stockpile of these weapons. At the same time, we must also address the scourge of the proliferation of all weapons, be they small arms, light weapons, or improvised explosive devices. Our work must also focus on ensuring that the international system remains fair, not only for all states, but more importantly, for all peoples. This system must work for the most vulnerable, especially the marginalized, migrants, refugees. The world has witnessed the enduring contribution of migrants in the fight against this pandemic. We still dream of an end to the disturbing incidents of racism, of Asian hate, of all prejudice. The Philippines United Nations Joint Program on Human Rights is an example of a constructive approach that puts our people, not our politics, at the center of this work.
Okay. So, part na ito ha. Um, dito na. Hindi naman dito lang, kanina pa. Doon sa mga, yung binabanggit niya yung frontliners, mga Filipinos. Yan. So, pinakikilala na niya rito ang Pilipino. No? Yung nagagawa ng ating lahi, no, ng mga kababayan natin sa mundo. Yan. Tapos, dito pinakikita rin niya kung ano ho yung naging concerted effort ng Pilipinas together with the United Nations para mapigilan yung mga naging problema. At isa nga doon, etong Asian hate. Kasi naisisisi po ito sa mga Asyano, di ba? Yan ang etong COVID kaya daw dumating sa kanila because it was originated in China. So I agree po na isa ho sa magaling na sa talumpati eto pong si PBBM. Alam niyo ho, may kulang pa nga dyan eh. Wala pa yung mga hand gestures na ganun ng tatay niya. Kulang pa siya doon. Ano magagawa natin? Anak yan. And besides, tinitrain niya ng tatay niya. Including sa pagsasalita, siya rin mismo. Sabi niya nga, idol ko, tatay ko eh. Plus the genes. Kaya nga pagka nagsalita, shit, akala mo minumulto ka. Sabi nga nung iba, nung unang marinig nila yan sa kanyang public speaking, nako, sabi nila parang yung mga inaatinan niyang debate, 'di ba? Sa DCRH doon ang nauna, parang ang tatay niya, sabi nila. Ako rin yung agad pumasok sa isip ko eh. Tuloy natin.
It provides a model for revitalizing the structures that facilitates solidarity between the United Nations and the sovereign duty bearer. Our continued solidarity will also benefit from a reformed and more inclusive Security Council and an empowered General Assembly that can hold the Council to account.
Okay. So ito, yan siya yan na. Okay, so sinasabi, ito daw yung teleprompter. Okay, let's assume this is the teleprompter. Okay? Kahit po may teleprompter, mahahalata niyo yan sa mata ng tao na nakatutok lang siya doon. At ang pinakamagaling po rito sa ating gumamit ng teleprompter ay si Gloria Arroyo. Kay PBBM, nasabi ko naman sa inyo may teleprompter, pero ang purpose ng teleprompter, para outline lang ito. Yun din naman ang sinabi ng mga tao niya maski nung nung inaugural speech niya eh. Ang may teleprompter, pero ang purpose ng teleprompter is maging organized lang. Kasi part na yan ng pagsiset up ng mga tao niya eh. Pero ang kapansin-pansin ho dito, galing sa puso niya, hindi ho galing sa nguso. Kasi kapag galing po sa puso, mararamdaman mo to talaga. Kapag galing po sa nguso, makikita mo sa facial expression. Mapifeel mo talaga na hindi siya sa iyo nakatingin. Yan. Iba ang teleprompter na speech ang laman at wala hong emotion. Kung nakita nyo kagabi, Yung babae doon na kasama ni Sal Panelo, yung babaeng naka-pink na payat, na halatang nagbabasa sa teleprompter, walang ka-emotion. Mukhang malabo yung letra ka. Mukhang halatang halata na nagbabasa. Yun yun. Pero dito makikita niyong buhay na buhay siya. At walang dahilan para bumasa siya sa teleprompter. Walang bago ho sa speech ni PBBM. Kung ano ang consistent siya sa yan ho kasi ang kanyang programa, yan ang kanyang stand. Dinadala niya ang Pilipinas in the global concept. Ganun ho ang kanyang programa ngayon, 'di ba?
At the same time, the United Nations must forge ahead with its flagship tradition of global peacekeeping.
Kinig sila.
My country's experience in
Ah,
building peace and
Pilipinas
forging
na
new
naman.
paths of cooperation can enrich the work of the Security Council. And to this end, I appeal for the valuable support of all UN member states for the Philippines' candidature to the Security Council for the term of 2027 to 2028. Our success in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao in the south of the Philippines is a centerpiece of these efforts. The peace that we have forged after many decades of conflict among warring factions and clansmen demonstrates that unity is possible even in the most trying circumstances. Inclusive dialogue involving all stakeholders, including women, the youth, faith leaders, and civil society, conducted with patience and good faith, has produced a credible and solid foundation for self-government that paves the way for lasting peace and sustainable development. We take the same approach in Asia. The Philippines builds partnerships for peace and development through dialogue, including through interfaith and interreligious dialogue, especially through ASEAN. In the face of great diversity, we believe that partnerships form the bridge to unite all of us in promoting peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region. Our global community is only as strong as we make it. We need to ensure that all nations, especially developing countries, are equipped with the tools they need to navigate the uncharted waters of this century. This requires a transformative development agenda. We therefore welcome the Summit of the Future next year as an opportunity to collectively roll up our sleeves and chart our common path.
Uy. Okay yun Ano, mag-host na ba tayo niyan?
Second, sustainability.
Yes.
We must seek solutions that preserve our planet. These solutions must transcend our time and win the future for the succeeding generations. We crafted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a platform of unity where our societies can build a future that is resilient and that is inclusive, where our people can be healthy, happy, and secure. This requires investment in food security, the fragility of which has been clearly demonstrated by the pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine. We need to take concrete steps towards a modern and resilient agriculture. For food is not just a trade commodity, nor is it just a livelihood. It is an existential imperative and a moral one. It is the very basis of human security. To attain food self-sufficiency and security, we are providing innovative solutions and financial support to farmers and fisherfolk.
Totoo naman yun Ano ba yung dinidistort niya doon? Talaga naman maya pag-uusapan natin yan. Ito totoo naman sinasabi niya.
To adapt new technologies and connect to national and global value supply chains. We look forward to forging cooperation with the UN and our partners to boost agricultural productivity and food security. As host to 17 UN agencies, programs and funds, the Philippines strongly supports reforms to ensure that the UN development system delivers as one through its UN country team. Water connects our world and sustains our existence, but it is also a finite resource that requires our stewardship. Equally important, our biodiversity must be protected amidst the continuing challenge of climate change. We must enhance our cooperation in these areas. But sustainability also requires development policies that go beyond the traditional metrics. We already know that the gross domestic product is an incomplete measure of progress and that vulnerability is multidimensional. Our development agenda must also take into account the interest of all developing nations, including middle-income countries where the majority of the world's poor live. At the same time, sustainability means equipping our people with the tools they need to meet the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution. Investments in education are key, and my administration is prepared to make such investments.
Okay. Fourth industrialization po. Mga kababayan, ito na-discuss ko na to dati. Ngayon, palpak po kasi yung global, ano bang tawag dito? Meron yan eh, it's a global setup na pinaiiral ngayon or before the pandemic. Dahil palpak ito, so they come up with a new one which is the reset. At ito pong fourth industrialization po, ang mangyayari po dito ay kaya nga hinihingi niyang bumalik ang mga scientists. Kasi what we need are people, the technocrats. Kasi sa kanila po nakasalalay. Sa scientist, puro po ito may kinalaman sa technical. Okay? And then science po. Yan po yung mga strategies na dapat kung saan po dapat nakabase. Ganyan. Okay? So yan ho ang ng global reset. Lahat na nga, grabe, binabanggit niya na ha. Lahat ng issues.
The Philippines notes with appreciation the Transforming Education Summit held earlier this week, at which these subjects were taken up. There is perhaps no greater renewable resource than the creativity and innovation of our young. We understand the value of harnessing our people's talents by creating a robust and creative economy. We will continue to work with partners in promoting this at the international level. Finally, science. Knowledge and discovery remain the keys to unlock the potential of our dynamic future. Encouraging our young people's curiosity, honing their skills, and protecting their intellectual properties are important investments. Humankind is pushing back its horizons, both in the digital world and out in our physical universe. Access to these domains is an inalienable right of all nations, as are peaceful uses of all existing and emerging technologies. The Philippines is preparing for the future.
Totoo pinagandaan niya yan. Alam niyo yung strategy niya. Pareho ng tatay niya. Merong salamin. Ganon. Doon niya pinoportray and they imagine, this is called internalization. Doon ka mag-i-speech, doon ka magsasalita sa harapan ng isang salamin. Expert po dyan ang mga call center agents. Yan, shout out sa mga taga-call center. Yan, internalization po yung ginagawa nila dyan. And it helps a lot pagdating nung oras na i-deliver mo na to. Kasi it's like you have been there. You're just simply repeating it. And keep repetitions makes, it's like a practice that makes it permanent. Diba? Natutuloy natin.
By laying the governance framework that will allow us to harness, by laying the governance framework digital world and out in our physical universe. Access to these domains is an inalienable right of all nations, as are peaceful uses of all existing and emerging technologies. The Philippines is preparing for the future. by laying the governance framework that will allow us to harness the power of renewable energy, develop the capacity to utilize the life sciences such as medicine and virology, pursue digital solutions towards a more modern economy, and expand our presence in outer space. But we also need to update the global structures that facilitate international cooperation on the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, biology, chemistry, to name but a few. At the same time, we need new structures to govern rapid advances in other areas. We need to start by defining the norms of responsible behavior in cyberspace and outer space, and forming legal rules that will prevent the weaponization of artificial intelligence. The diffusion of cutting-edge technology across the economy is promising, but they could come at a cost. Our development agenda must consider the possible displacement of human labor as a result of advances in automation. We must prepare our economic structures for this. We should start building the necessary supports for those sectors affected. Mr. President, the transcendent challenges of our time are as consequential as those that faced us 77 years ago when we founded this august body. We are indeed at a watershed moment, one that requires a refounding of these, our United Nations. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, the world is ready for transformation. It is up to us as leaders of our nations to move and shape that transformation. The future beckons, and we can embark upon that journey as single nations or as a world in harmony. I say, let the challenges of one people be the challenges for all nations. And in that way, the success of one will be a success for us all. The peoples of the world look to their leaders, to us, to make into reality these aspirations for our future. We must not fail them. And if we stand together, we will not fail them. If we stand together, we can only succeed. Let us dream. Let us work for those successes for all our nations united. Thank you and good day.
Wow, grabe. Ang bigat. 'Di ba? Grabe. Ang gustong-gusto kong yung nakakaluha yung huling bahagi lalo eh. Because ano eh, it's giving emphasis on the concerted effort or the united effort, 'di ba? Ang ano ho kasi dito mga kababayan, in, interdependent po ang ekonomiya ng bawat bansa. Kung meron ng isang bansa na kailangan mo na hindi wala ka naman, yun ho ang ibig sabihin doon. Mag-iikutan lang po tayo. Kaya lang, ang gusto ko lang pong ang pinaka isa sa esensya ng speech na to ni PBBM, maski yung panawagan niyang magbalik na rito, ito nga chinichismis ko na sa inyo. Though we are in the interconnection of economies, in the interaction or intercourse of the nations, kailangan po natin na mapaghandaan ito. Kailangan natin na sasabay tayo sa agos ng mundo. Ang sabi niya, and now Mr. President, that the world is ready, 'di ba? To reshape or ready for change. Kasi po, nandun po nga sinasabi ko sa inyong fourth industrialization. I-research nyo po ang ibig sabihin yan. So kinakailangan po, tayo ho ay makapaghanda. At makasabay tayo sa pagbangon ng ibang mga bansa, and at the same time, hindi lamang tayo aasa, maging self-sufficient tayo. Though, for him, the key role is the investment. Sabi niya nga kanina, para dyan. Pero, the strategy that he did not mention, which being hidden, doon po yung strategy, doon sa panawagan niyang umuwi na kayo. Dahil meron tayong umiiral na programa, time pa ni Pangulong Duterte, balik scientist program, which is for technocrats to avail of. Yan. Grabe. Ang ganda ng speech ni PBBM dito. Pasensya na lang, hindi ko na kinaya kagabi talagang hintayin ito. Madaling araw na ito eh. Hindi ko na kaya. Ang pagpikit ko pang 8 pikit tap dilat ko, hanggang dilat na lang at nakita ko na, ay wala na. May naka-live, pero hindi ko na talaga kinaya. Natulog na ako. Sabi ko, sige, mamaya ko na lang ito i-discuss. Ayun. Okay. So, congratulations. Muli nagkaroon tayo ng ano naman ang problema mo dun? Nagmamarunong. Hindi ho ako nagmamarunong. Naiintindihan ko lang po. Naiintindihan ko lang yun. Yung kanyang mga sinabi. Hindi ho yun pagmamarunong. At wala hong masama na ipaliwanag natin. Masama ho kapag ang pinaliliwanag natin hindi naman natin naintindihan. Yun ang pinakamahirap sa lahat gawin. Okay po. O siya, sige. Maraming salamat po muli sa inyong lahat. At teka, mukhang may pupuntahan lang ako eh. Nako, hala, stress na pala. Dapat 2:30 yun. Oh my God. Siya, sige ho, maraming salamat sa inyo, Fred. Doon sa iba pa na nagbigay ng mga stars dyan o ano, hindi ko kasi nakikita rito. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. Pero maraming salamat din po sa mga comments. Yan, at sa pagsama sa atin ngayon. Mamaya hong 4:00 ako huy magbabalik. At samahan niyo ho ako sa isang live na naman na discussion na meron po tayong mga kasama. Okay. Thank you so much. God bless everyone.
Areas. But sustainability also requires development policy.